We can't tell stories in the way that we've always told them anymore. If we do that, we're irrelevant. You know, we die. We know where that road leads. It's been leading that way for 20 years. If we do everything the way we've always done it, we'll fall in a heap. Nothing could be clearer. So what choice have we got? Of course we have to innovate. Of course we have to do things differently. Of course we have to talk to our audience in the ways that they want to be spoken to. Of course we have to address them in the places that where they are. If we don't have an audience anymore.
Journalists need to find new ways of making their storytelling compelling, and particularly in the digital space, there is so much competition for the attention of any one set of eyeballs. There is always so much going on in the internet space, so many links to things, so many different news sources, that if you're to capture the reader's attention, you've really got to think about not just how do I tell a great traditional yarn, but how do we present this in such a way that people don't get distracted, that they stay the course of the story.
Innovation is about trying to do things first and for them to be a success. But, I think that you have to be brave and take risks and try things to get something to pull off. But of course those risks have to be calculated. So I guess the mindset is to be cautiously ambitious constantly.
I think there's misunderstanding of what innovation is, and I think it's a real challenge for the traditional broadcasters and media industries to get their heads around it, because the medium has shifted so much.
Whichever way you look at it, right now we're in the middle of a revolution. There is change going on, and we don't know how it's going to end up. Clay Shirky from New York famously put forward this hypothesis that you know what the situation is like before a revolution happens, and you know what the status is after the revolution happens, but when you're in the middle of it, you don't know what's going to happen. The people in the middle of it have no sense of where it's going or what it's going to end up like, and that's where we are now. We know what it was like before the disruptive power of the internet in any of these platforms. We don't know what it's going to look like afterwards. It'll be different. Some things will pass, other things will rise. I'm very optimistic about it because I see there's opportunity as well as loss.
I'd say one of the things I've learned about journalism from doing data work is it's been a reminder that it's about the stories. It's not about the words, it's not about the numbers. It's about a new way of telling stories. And data is just one of those.
Us old dinosaurs, we used to decide what was important at the 5:30 news conference, and we'd watch a bit of commercial television news to see what they were doing, laugh them off, and then hand out our newspapers the next day with what we deemed were the important stories. And in many respects, they were incredibly boring stories. When I worked at The Age, and I was an acting news editor on a Sunday afternoon, I mean, you'd have that sphincter tightening moment when you looked at your news list and you'd go, oh my God, I've got nothing here that's interesting, but I kind of think that the editor will like the ANZ job results survey. Oh, eye-glazing stuff, but we'd always lead the paper on Monday morning with virtually the same story on the economy that was indecipherable, and there was no analysis with it, no explanation about what it meant. We thought it was important, but we didn't give the reader the tools to understand why it was important. And then we just learned that they were buying us for the job ads anyway. So now we're all exposed because our revenues have departed. All the old classified revenues and the rivers of gold that used to just flood through organisations like Fairfax and News Corporation, they've gone. And now we have to rely on our wits. And I think that's why even slumbering old dinosaur journos are discovering the beauty. I mean, if you do a live blog and you're a journo, I've seen many of them go, oh, I don't want to do that. That's, it's not my scene. When they do it, they're instantly addicted because they suddenly have an audience. And they're talking to them and they're engaging with them and they're arguing with them and they're getting hectored, and it's a debate. And that's where we need to be.
Somebody needs to find and create the stories, right? A large part of news and content is storytelling, right? Innovation, I think, comes in recognizing that storytelling now has to work in a number of different situations, and that demands at least thought about what forms of storytelling make sense, right? If you follow the media blogs, as I'm sure many of us do, Neiman Lab, Pointer, etc., in the last year, listicles has probably been referenced a number of times as a new form of journalism, right? It's a trite example, but it's an interesting one, right? And we seem to be stuck with it, right? It'll be interesting to see whether or how those sorts of forms of storytelling evolve over time.
There are stories that are happening right now in places that, with the sort of typical skill set, you just can't get at them. But if you expand a little bit, if you open your head a little bit and look at what would I need to do to be able to get that? I have an idea, what would I need to do to be able to make that idea happen? When you start to think of things that way, then you start to be able to tell stories that otherwise would just vanish.